Rebecca Rusch, welcome to Second Nature. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh my gosh, it's an honor. Yeah, we have a long history, and I'm really excited for this next chapter that you've got going on with Dylan.
It's been so fun so far, and the feedback we've been getting has been really great. Your feedback has been really great. It gets me so excited to hear from everybody, and the support you've given us so far has been really awesome. And it made complete sense to ask you to join us on the podcast because there's so much to talk about. You've blazed this trail for so many athletes in so many different respects, and you've had such an incredible history in multiple sports and doing multiple things around sport that this is the perfect discussion to have. I think everybody is going to get something out of this, whether they're an athlete, an event producer, media. I mean, all the different things that you've been involved with over your career. So I'm fired up for this. I think it's gonna be really cool.
I'm fired up too. Thanks. Yeah, there's a lot of layers.
Where do we even start? I think for those who are uninitiated or who maybe only have heard of your mountain bike escapades or have heard of a few things, like where did it all start for you? What was the call to adventure for you where you decided I'm going to be a professional athlete? Was there a big turning point where there was like a big unlock?
That's a great question. I never planned to be a professional athlete. I didn't have a whole business plan or any of that. The sports sort of world started for me in high school, where I found cross country running as a high school athlete, and that was pretty pivotal for me. And no one in my family had been involved in sports, and I found running and really found a community and found like this love of adventure and exploring and all that. And that's really been a theme that's carried throughout my life. I never thought I would be able to, develop a career in sport. And so in college, I, ran cross country. I got a degree in marketing and went to work at health clubs because that was the best way I could figure out to combine business and being around sports. But it was indoor sports, so it wasn't that awesome. And the health club, it was in downtown Chicago. I was, writing their little newsletters and things, and they had an indoor climbing wall. And this is in the 90s, so this was before there were climbing gyms everywhere, and they had this 100-foot high climbing wall. And that kind of sealed the deal for me to learning to rock climb, being outside, really finding outdoor sports. And so I headed west, went to California, became a climbing guide, and did a bunch of stuff like that. And always just trying to find these little jobs to be able to stay in sport. And that really kind of just kept layering and layering. I ended up being a part owner and manager of a chain of rock climbing gyms that launched in California called Rock Creation, and right around the corner from Red Bull, where you used to work. And that's kind of how that connection started. And quite honestly, I just kept getting asked to do these events, do these things. And there was a pivotal moment where I quit my dream job, which was running rock climbing gyms, um, to go adventure racing and go get basically a ticket to travel. And I was invited as a woman. Adventure racing teams will go back a little bit. Those were multi-sport, multi-day, these really cool adventures all around where you're navigating, you're riding horses, you're paddling, and you're doing all this stuff. And I was a paddler and a runner, rock climber, and got invited to do some of these events. And that really launched into what was my sports career, because I ended up going on some races, doing really well internationally, and then sort of taking over like the team management of like getting sponsorship and planning our travel. And I basically was like an athlete manager for our team while still competing. And I learned a lot in that. And that really morphed into bike riding, into more adventures and expeditions. And so there wasn't a moment where I was like, I'm going to, become a professional athlete and start a sports career. It was more this like adventurous kid who was like getting invited to do cool stuff. And it kept saying yes and figuring out a way to make it work. And, that was 30 something years ago. And it's morphed into a really, really successful and fruitful sports industry career, athletic career morphed with sports industry.
So it seems like you've always had this eye for the adjacencies of what you were doing. For example, you were working at this rock climbing gym, but then you were, looking around for, to get involved with more things. You were on the adventure team, but then you saw the opportunity to help manage the team and manage the athletes. And you've always kind of had this eye for, the bigger picture of what could be done. It's kind of interesting to think about that and how that sort of played out in the rest of your career. Was that something that just kind of was like a natural thing that you were always kind of looking to the bigger picture? How did you think about zooming out in that era?
I mean, anyone who wants to work in the outdoor industry, and especially as an athlete, needs to be an entrepreneur, an innovator, be able to evolve because, there's not a clear path to, okay, you get this job as an athlete and then you stay in that job for 10 years or 5 years or whatever. It doesn't really work as a traditional business. And so an athlete is always going to be a business. And it's funny to me, I've always thought that way of like, okay, if I want to go do these things, how can I figure it out? I've got to be creative. It's expensive. I can't pay for it. Okay, I'm going to get partners, aka sponsors. But quite honestly, I've always thought of the athlete as a business, and the sponsors are your clients that you want to meet their client needs. I've never looked at, oh, someone's going to give me a paycheck just to be me. It's this responsibility of okay, if somebody's going to invest in me, how do I really make over deliver and give them a return on their investment so that I can keep my job? So a lot of it was, selfishly motivated. And quite honestly, I was at a time, it's different now being an athlete. I was at a time where it wasn't really a thing, athletes being sponsored to go rock climbing, or, there was, of course, the traditional sports of baseball, soccer, but outdoor athletics, 20, 25 years ago, it was a little bit different. And I feel really grateful. I was on the cutting edge of, I got in the door at Red Bull, and which is how we met. And that really molded a lot of my innovation by being pushed of like, well, figure it out. What are you going to do? Instead of being told what to do, like you need to go to this event or do this thing, it was much more open ended of what do you want to do? And that was both really scary but also really empowering to be like, wow, I can design this how I want. But it also breeds insecurity. There's no job security, there's often financial insecurity. And so if you want to survive, you get creative and you figure it out. And it's fun at times, and it's also pretty stressful at times. 25, 30 years. I was 22 years as a Red Bull athlete, which is a really long run. I'm 55 now, and I still have athlete partners that I'm working with, but each partnership is 1 or 2 years, and then you have to earn your keep again. And I've had years where I won world championships and still wasn't sure if I was going to keep my partners. And so there was always this sense that I wanted to over deliver, and I wanted to be creative, and I wanted to carve my own path, but definitely wasn't an easy path. And you were my athlete manager. I'll just share with the group, one of the best people I've ever worked with, because it was one of the few relationships that were collaborative, where you were pushing me, you were asking me questions, I was asking you questions, and there was a real support teamwork part of it. And that's pretty rare in the athlete sponsorship model. It's kind of, usually you're not given any on the job training. You're just told, here, we've signed you, now just go do something rad. And, you're not really coached. You're not really given professional development. You're not told how to, launch a website. What do I need to do? And so you start figuring those things out, and then you start seeing the return where a partner's like, wow, we didn't expect, you kind of went above and beyond what we expected. So you sort of start thinking that you get that feedback of like, oh, okay, I've got to over deliver and do some different things that other people aren't doing. Like I was one of the first athletes to send like an annual update to my partners. And this was like 20 years ago, and we still do that. Now it's a quarterly update, but it's like, hey, we want you to know what you spent your money on and how it went. And that's kind of a standard thing now, I think. But, at the time it was pretty rare. So I did treat it like a business, and it's paid off. That's why I'm still here.
That's one of the really interesting questions that a lot of people are asking now is, what does it mean to be a professional athlete? And obviously that's changed a lot over the years, but this idea of thinking of it like a business is something that obviously has helped you to stand out. I think one of the other things that I saw at Red Bull over the time that I was there, you were there longer than I was. I was only 12 years at Red Bull. But one of the things that I saw that I really liked was that the athletes sort of cross pollinated and shared best practices with each other. And you were there in sort of the early days in Red Bull. Were there people in the early days, or even today? I mean, you started basically without much of a blueprint at all of how to become a professional athlete, how to build your sort of empire.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have necessarily a lot of people out there, or if there were people, it wasn't readily available on Instagram or YouTube or whatever. How did you go about sort of building the blueprint, or who did you look to, or where did you take inspiration for any of that, or was it all just sort of, you know
Yeah, that's a good. I mean, it was a combination of me, making shit up as I was going along, and I'm still doing that. I'm still, and that's the key to sort of staying in an industry that's evolving. Is you keep evolving with it. So some of it was making stuff up as I went along. Some of it was looking outside. I did a lot of different sports, and I think that has helped me because I hung out with climbers and I saw what they were doing, and a bunch of North Face athletes, and I hung out with paddlers and I saw what they were doing. Um, and I think it's one of the things that is challenging in the bike industry is that it's very myopic, and many of those athletes don't cross pollinate, and many of the people in leadership or working within the industry, they aren't cross pollinating, and so it's actually a detriment. So Red Bull did do that. There, we'd get to meet, skydivers and race car drivers, and you start to find that you're more similar than you are dissimilar. It's kind of like when you travel and you meet people from a foreign country, and you're like, wow, we're not all that different. And so that was really inspiring for me to just see what other athletes were doing in other sports. But quite honestly, I was blurring the lines, and that's what adventure racing was, which was what I was doing. So it is paddling and everything all together. So by nature, I think I wasn't confined to, this is the World Cup race series and you have to go to all these events and you're going to see the same 100 people on the race line at every event. Like, it was not that controlled, which I think suited my creativity and my innovation. But I also think a lot of it came from the fact we grew up. My mom worked. My dad was shot down in the Vietnam War when I was really young, and my sister and I had to fend for ourselves a lot. And so I think we kind of by circumstance really developed an entrepreneurial and figure it out kind of grit sort of spirit. And I sort of take that with me wherever I go.
Here's the question I'm the most curious about, because having been in the competitive side of things and still being a professional athlete now, was it easier back then, or is it easier now to be a professional athlete? Because now you have all these different tools, different ways to build community, different ways to get a message out or to be effective and bring value to brands, to the bike industry at large. Back then, there weren't as many avenues to do that. What do you think? Like, what was the best era? What was the I don't know if easiest era is the right one, but what do you think? Is it easier now to be a pro?
I don't think anything's easier now because we're inundated with technology and the pace of things that are moving. So now, yes, you can have an Instagram post, you can get messages out there, you can host your own podcast, but the expectation is that you're an elite athlete and you launch a foundation and you have a podcast and you teach free clinics for girls and doing whatever. So actually there's quite a lot of, I think, more pressure now. There's more ways to get in, I think, in more ways to get visibility, but the pressure to be basically this super multifaceted, you've got to be a videographer, you've got to be a writer, and it truly is a business. So I think there's more demand now than there was 20 years ago. I think when you asked the question of who really affected my career early on, it was a lot of personal relationships. Jamie Simon, who's a world class paddler, she was my first Red Bull athlete manager, and she's the one that got my foot in the door there. And it's because she saw what I was doing somehow, and I went in and had a conversation with her. I literally walked into the office, asked for a meeting with this total stranger, and sat down and did that. That's pretty rare now. And so if I were, advising, and I try to help young athletes now, if you can combine the best of, the old days to the current and not lose the personal touch, and that's what you did so well. Like, you need a human being. It's not just about social media points and or social media posts. And this is where I would say to athletes, if you think of your partners as clients, what does a client need? Do they want you to win world championships first and foremost, or do they want you to have a podcast? Like, asking, prioritizing what are the needs, because an athlete can't do it all and compete at the highest level. And so if first and foremost performance is the number one indicator, return on investment for that partner, then that's what you have to do. And you and I, we have a mutual friend, Kate Courtney, and she'd asked me some advice. Should I do this and should I launch a foundation? And I was like, go win races while you can win races right now. You're going to have your whole career to be, because it's a short window to be a World Cup mountain bike racer.
Mm-hmm.
It's a longer window to do, explorations and expeditions like I'm doing, but she's got time for that. And that is the priority of what she's hired to do right now and what her partners want for her. Of course, she breaks the mold, and she just launched a foundation as well. And she's amazing, but her primary focus is her sport. And so I don't think it's easier now. I actually think it's harder because there's so much noise. And so prioritizing what is the most important thing for your partners and for you. What do you want to do as an athlete too? I think that's an important part, is that you have these partners, they expect you to win or be on the podium or do whatever it is that is important to them, but you also need to do what feeds your soul. And it's definitely one of my core values that, it's why I'm in the outdoor industry. I could have made a lot more money and had a lot more job security and a lot less stress choosing a different career path, but I'm here because of passion, because I love being outside. I love what I'm doing. And when people ask, why have you changed sports so many times? And even within cycling, like 100 milers, 24 hours, now expeditions and bike packing and winter bike packing. And it's because I'm following passion and I'm doing the things that excite me. And so that's critical first and foremost. And, that's how athletes know when their career needs to evolve, is when they start to get bored or burnt out or kind of looking over into something else that seems interesting. And the beauty of current day is there is a lot of room for creativity. I think the challenge today is choosing and saying no,
Mm-hmm.
actually, to a lot of things. And you've pushed me to do a podcast for many years, and I haven't done it yet. I probably will, but because I wasn't ready, because I couldn't fit it in, and it would have eroded some of the other goals that I had in the time being,
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you've been great. You pushed me really hard to get into video, and I have a YouTube channel now that's finally growing. But you pushed me for that 10 years ago, and you saw, the writing on the wall, and you were ahead of your time, but I wasn't ready, and I wasn't ready to learn, video editing skills because I couldn't. So I think that's important too for any athlete, and for a business that's sponsoring athletes, is knowing what is in somebody's wheelhouse or your own wheelhouse and not asking them to be something they're not.
Yep.
And if you ask them to be something that they don't have skill set in, as a partner, you better provide support. Red Bull was a great example of, we got to collaborate on Blood Road, the most important ride of my life, riding the Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I went to Red Bull and said, I want to do this project and I needed help because I wasn't going to be able to figure out the logistics or fund the filming or do any of that myself. And so that got approved. It was a pitch, it was a whole thing. I got approved with your help and a lot of people going, yeah, we're going to invest in this thing. We're not going to ask Rebecca to be a filmmaker. We're going to ask her to ride her bike with this amazing story, and we're going to handle the filming and we're going to handle the launch. So I think that that's important ask for both the basically the client, the customer, and the athlete and the partner is, how do you both together achieve the most important goals and not just expect the athlete to literally run like 10 businesses while they're competing at the highest level.
Yeah. Yeah, Red Bull actually had a sort of a categorization internally within the athlete team of project and competitive athletes where they would basically put you in one of two buckets. Are they a competitive athlete? And the expectations line up with that. Are they winning world titles? Are they competing at the highest level? Are they on their way to competing at the highest level? Or are they a project athlete? And what projects are they working on? And the expectations for that were, around projects like Blood Road or big activations or events. How do we support them to do the ideas and the projects that they have in mind? And I think that's rare. I think a lot of brands can't necessarily afford or support both of those things. It's almost like one or the other. And to your point of what are the deliverables that the client is actually asking for, being a professional athlete, let's say, doesn't necessarily mean you're the right professional athlete for every single bike brand, because some bike brands might really prioritize a project based athlete that's very media heavy, and other brands might prioritize more of the competitive athletes. And I think that's okay. And I think the bike industry needs both those things. Every industry does, really. You need these creative, project based people who aren't trying to necessarily compete. They're trying to share stories, they're trying to inspire, become aspirational figures. And then there are also the people that are racing to be on the podium. So I think the advice that you gave Kate was very much like stay in this competitive bucket until it's time to move on to the project bucket. And some people start in that project athlete bucket and stay there the entire time. Some people make that transition over. And it's interesting to see people make that move or attempt to make that move. And also, being on the other side, being a Red Bull athlete manager, trying to pull someone into the project side is not as easy as you'd think. Some people are pretty resistant to it, and some people don't know when their time in the competition bucket is over, and that's when it gets really challenging. One of you kind of talked about this a little bit of switching sports throughout your career, and we also talked about how you've started the Be Good Foundation. You run an event called Rebecca's Private Idaho. You've done uh, all the camps, Rush Academy, all these different things. How did you know when you were building all these different things out? How did you know when it was the right time to add on each one? Like an event feels like a very natural extension of what you were doing at the time. Rebecca's Private Idaho was one of the first real iconic gravel races. And then, of course, gravel racing blew up, which is awesome. But that was like one of the very first. How did you know what order to do, or what made you really decide when it was time to pull each one of those elements into your kind of overall business?
I can look back. I guess I kind of have this superpower of intuition because I can see it also in the sports I was involved with. I transitioned from 24-hour I got into 24-hour mountain bike racing when it was kind of in its heyday. And then I transitioned into some other stuff, stage race mountain bike racing, and then into Leadville 100, and then into gravel, and then bike packing, which is blowing up. So I seem to have been like just on the front end of the curve of all of those sort of iterations, and the same with launching a gravel event. And honestly, I don't know where it comes from, Lucy. It's just this sense I have of like, and it's a curiosity of my own, like, oh, okay, I wonder if I could do Leadville, I wonder if I could do that. And so it's sort of listening to that little inner voice of what I want to do personally, and then going and experiencing it. And, like in the case of Rebecca's Private Idaho, I was forced to go to a gravel event, 12 years ago, by a partner. This was one of those things where rare occasion where I was forced to go to a gravel event, and gravel was nothing. And at the time, and to me, I'm a mountain biker, and gravel was road racing, and road is like a dirty 4-letter word for me, and I was forced to go to this long event, 200 miles, which was fine. 200 miles is no big deal, but I thought for sure I was going to just be so bored and I was going to hate it. And it was just going to check a box for a partner. And it was really kind of inspiring because I went and did that adventure and was like, wow, this is actually really cool. And that launched Rebecca's Private Idaho from there. And now, of course, we all know gravel is the fastest growing segment of cycling. So I think it's just kind of listening to my heart and listening to kind of like when I left my dream job as a rock climbing gym owner, to go travel. It was kind of this little voice of curiosity. And I think that's something that's so important in our careers. You've been good about this, of like, if there's curiosity and something makes your hands sweat a little, or you like, I wonder, then that's a real message for somebody who's a creator and an entrepreneur and a risk taker to maybe explore down that channel a little bit.
I mean, putting on events is such a massive undertaking. It did feel like a natural extension of your brand. And there were so many cool elements. I'm a 3-time finisher of Rebecca's Private Idaho. And I had just an epic time every single time, just all the different touch points that you put into the event and how you integrated your partners and how you integrated Idaho. There was potatoes at each one of the stops, just like all these little things were so just spot on. What was the hard part about putting the event together? Because that stuff sounds fun, but it had to have been crazy difficult to put on an event of that scale year after year.
Yeah, it's pretty hard, and it still is. I'll give a sort of nod to anybody who's trying to choose what events to go to. Go to an athlete run event. Go to an event that is put on by someone like Dylan or me or somebody who's been an athlete themselves, pretty hardcore, and gone to events all around the world, because those people know what the rider or the runner wants. And so athlete run events to me are always better because there's nothing missed on the course, that like aid stations are how they want to be. So you have a more insider's view if you go to an event that's athlete run. And yeah, I just put an event on in the way that I would want it to be run. And so that part is easy, designing it, going out and finding a cool course and thinking of names and telling your friends about it. That part's really fun. The part with event management and running that's really hard is permits, logistics, the sort of political dance that has to happen with the community and the landowners and insurance companies. So that part is hard. But what we experienced here in Idaho, once there was proof of concept and the locals and the city administrators and people saw what was happening, then they were like, oh, I get it. But I was having to convince a bunch of people who aren't athletes how cool this could be. And that's been the hardest part. But this will be 12 years, and I'm pretty proud of the event, and it's still going strong, and it's brought a lot of support to the community. It's our number one fundraiser for the Be Good Foundation. Our bike shops now sell gravel bikes, gravel tires. Like, our community has changed because of that event. And I'm really proud of that because a ton of people who were intimidated to go mountain biking have found cycling and exploring and getting off the beaten path. And that's what's really cool about gravel, is it gives people a way to go adventuring that isn't terrifying for them.
Yeah, yeah. From an event specific standpoint, I mean, you could have easily run a 24-hour mountain bike race, or I mean, obviously you do the Queen Stage race and stuff like that. But it does seem like gravel had the widest addressable audience to get anybody and everybody on two wheels, basically.
Yeah, and there wasn't really a lot of gravel racing at the time. But you're right. I always thought I'd put on a mountain bike event in my local community. And then after I went and rode a couple gravel events, I was like, you know what? This is more inclusive. more people can come, kids can come, new riders can come, pros can come. And so I went to a gravel event format just because more people could experience it, and it be more accessible for more people. And I'm really glad I went that route instead of a mountain bike course route. And also, there's density on mountain bike trails, especially post COVID. And now more people are getting outside, which is awesome. But I also didn't want to be the person that clogged up all of our single track locally, and because I live here and I didn't want to piss people off. And so I knew if I did a mountain bike event, it would have to stay pretty small because I wouldn't want to impact our trails or our trail community in a negative way.
Yeah. Dylan and I talk so much about the accessibility of outdoor sports and how we can provide the biggest possible funnel to pull people into, or top of funnel to pull people into outdoor sports. And when you go to a ski resort and it costs $300 for a day to rent your skis and get your lift ticket and all that stuff, that's not really accessibility.
Yeah.
But anybody can get on two wheels. Anybody can ride on a gravel road. Anybody can pedal most of the course. That one hill is pretty rough, but you know, it's a great course. It's so fun. It's beautiful. I've had some of my best days riding on your event. So
Well, and maybe we should put up a picture in the show notes of your the muscle suit, that skin suit you wore that one year. That was classic.
now that suit is actually excellent for cycling, especially on the road, because as you know, when it comes to road cycling, I was for a brief stint also did triathlon because I was working with Eric. And so I was doing a fair bit of road biking. And one of the most important things as a road biker is being seen by cars.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have flashing lights and they wear bright clothes, but nothing attracts attention better than a full body skin suit that's like all your muscles and stuff. So they were not missing me. And in fact, they were staring at me. So I feel like that was really a pretty effective hack for being visible on the road. That's all I'm going to say.
It's a pretty creepy. Everyone should look at the picture because it's a awesome. It's awesome. You do stare at it. You're like, oh my gosh. Um, I'm going to give you props because you've been on the athlete side and the athlete manager sponsorship side. You did something that no one has ever done, that I've ever worked with, and you got involved when you're Red Bull athlete manager. You went and committed to taking part in every single sport of the athletes that you managed, and you managed, I think, like 25 athletes or something. It was a big number. And so you got into ultra running, you came to Rebecca's Private Idaho and did gravel racing. I mean, you got your feet wet in all of them. And what that gave you, kind of the point where I'm like, anyone go to run, do a race that's run by an athlete. You wanted to immerse yourself so you could understand your athlete better. You wanted to understand what it's like to do an ultra run or a long gravel race. You know, so I have to give you props for that, because anyone who manages athletes, maybe you don't have to go out and do all the sports, but you need an understanding. If you're going to understand the human being, you need to understand what they do. And that was really, really quite special and unique that you did that. And you got into a bunch of different sports.
I mean, I learned from the best in every single category. Why wouldn't you take advantage of an opportunity? I mean, Dylan was my coach for all the 50-mile races that I did. So I had it pretty good, whether it came to getting training tips or gear tips or whatever. I had my pick of the best athletes in the world. It would be silly not to take advantage of that. But you're
That's
right. It
cool.
was a great way to develop kind of a shorthand with all the athletes that I was working with. And it also made those collaboration sessions so much easier because we were speaking the same language, because I understood at least partially. I had enough knowledge to be dangerous with every single sport that I worked in. And I think that made those collaborative discussions so much easier specifically because of that.
It's
Uh,
so hard as an athlete to try to explain to a partner who really has no concept of what you're doing. It's really hard to sell yourself when they don't really understand the branch of work that you're in. It's a big challenge.
so one of the things that really kind of, I would say from the outside, was like a big step change for you in your career was Blood Road. You went from this competitive, you're still competing in all these different events and going around and crushing everything. And then you went to Vietnam and you rode the Ho Chi Minh Trail and you made this giant documentary, Blood Road. And I felt like that was a big turning point for you where you really took on and understood the meaning of storytelling from the perspective of an athlete and speaking to a community through storytelling instead of just podiums and events. I felt like you understood the depth of how far you could take everything through storytelling as a result of that trip. And obviously you went on a big tour. I don't even know how many times you've seen that film at this point, but you traveled around a lot. Like, talk about just talk about the experience there and sort of the sort of what you realized through that phase, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, Blood Road was it was pivotal for me personally, professionally. I'd never done anything like that. I'd never made a film. I never set out to make a film. Um, I really just had this sort of urge to go find the place where my dad died when I was 3, and the only way I knew how to do that was to go on a like amazing bike adventure. And so it was like these two things combined. It was really the first time in my life that I combined my work and my athletic career with a personal mission, and a personal mission that wasn't just to win something or to keep my job, or and not to say that I didn't have a blast or go exploring before that, but it was very much, I think the real big pivot with Blood Road was shifting from me to like the world around me, and shifting from my personal motivations to realizing that I could combine the things I love to do, the things I'm good at, with a bigger purpose. I mean, and quite honestly, it was so amazing to learn that I could combine those things. And this whole next part of my career, that's, Blood Road was 9 years ago, and the shape of my career since then has all become, you know, still adventures, still exploring, still winning races in some aspects, but with a broader swath of helping other people get involved in sport, or helping, somebody else find the magic of the bike, and launching a foundation. So to know that I didn't have to leave one thing to gain another thing, and I've always wanted to do that. RPI has always been a fundraising ride even before I had a foundation. Like, I've always wanted to give back. It's why I started the event. I did free girls mountain bike clinics for years with the Gold Rush tour, but I didn't have a clear path of how I could combine my sport and my adventure and what I want to do with a bigger mission. And Blood Road really helped me realize I didn't have to leave one thing to gain another. And I kind of, to you made a point earlier that athletes, hang on to the competitive side, or they don't want to morph. I feel like Blood Road gave me the gift of being able to do both, and being able to be a competitive athlete or adventure athlete, or go push myself, super hard, but I didn't have to leave that behind in order to sort of broaden the reach, and get more people, I mean, into cycling, into outdoors, into nature, into being outside. And that is a really big part of all the work that I'm doing, thanks to Blood Road, and thanks to like me getting that vision of being able to combine like some big passions and some personal family goals. But yeah, it was such a gift. And it's taken me 9 years to actually really shape and understand and morph that. You and I've had conversations recently of like, I still don't know where my career is going. I still don't, people are like, you're so accomplished, you've done all these things. But we said at the beginning, you've got to be an innovator, you've got to be an entrepreneur, you've got to be shifting and changing all the time. And so Blood Road was the catalyst to shift into sort of another branch of my career, but I'm still figuring it out. I'm still in it.
Mhm.
Yes, I have a foundation. Yes, I'm doing, some speaking, and really trying to kind of open the magic of the outdoors to more people. But I still don't know exactly how that's going to look. I'm still figuring it out, which is fun and nerve wracking and exciting all at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. I mean, if you didn't have stuff to figure out, it would be sort of boring, right? Like who wants to have it all sorted out at this point? You know, this is what's got you here. I feel like the magic has been from making these transitions, from taking what you learned in one category and bringing it to the next and then applying what you learned. I mean, that's the whole hero's journey, right? Like you go on this thing, you go through these trials and tribulations and survive the abyss, and then you bring back this magic to the beginning of the next journey, and
Yeah.
you continue on and continue on. And so all these different moves that you've made over the course of your career, why would you expect any of that process to, like, your growth to stop at any point? You know, you're always going to keep reapplying what you learned and bringing it back and reapplying it and growing. What
Yeah, I mean, I love that because the hero's journey, everyone knows that, but have you heard of the heroine's journey? Do you know
no,
that?
tell me about it.
So very similar. And I feel like I've been doing the hero's journey of like going out, figuring it out, morphing, building on the next lesson. I mean, absolutely the trail and being outdoors, that's my school, that's my teacher, that's where I learn, especially ultra endurance stuff. The heroine's journey is very similar to the hero's journey, except it's not so outward. It's much more of, you don't have to go slay the dragon um, in another town and then come back, or in the cave or whatever, which is a very external journey. The heroine's journey is an internal exploration of like, what dragons are you slaying on the inside as well. And I think that that is the big morph for me, of a lot of introspection, a lot of thought about what did bring me to here, and how do I make a more whole progression that isn't just the hardcore athlete who's going to crush everybody and be the last one standing, but it's deeper than that. Now, yes, it includes that gritty, warrior, but it's maybe a little bit more of the peaceful warrior and like I know you and I've read some of the same books, so the heroine's journey is a little bit more of an internal. And
Yeah.
yes, she does, and it can be a male or a female. Yes, you come back with some learnings, but it might be learnings more about yourself than necessarily how to slay an actual dragon or
I love
lion
it.
or whatever. So I really feel like I'm in that phase right now, which is really cool. Is taking all my athletic stuff, all the stuff I've learned from the trail, and then really that pivotal moment of Blood Road is going inside and what did that mean for me, and what does it mean for me going forward. And people, and it's taken me this long to figure it out, people asked me about Blood Road, like, oh, you're a month on the trail, 1,200 miles through the jungle, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, it must have been insanely hard. And from day, as soon as I got back, it was like, no, the physical part was not the hard part, it was the emotional part, the opening, having to be recorded on film, having to share my journal, literally give my journals to Nick Shrunk, the creative director. Like, that internal peeling open was really the hardest part of that adventure, but that kind of set the stage now for this next chapter of being more open, more vulnerable, more welcoming, to bring people in, to bring more people on the trail literally with me if I can.
Yeah, amazing. I love the heroine's journey, and I feel like across all the people that I talk to, the heroine's journey is probably more useful than the hero's journey. So many people, their number one enemy is themselves. They're standing in the way of their own success, you know, and thinking about that internal roadblocks that need to get cleared out, and how you might approach that. I think it's a really fascinating way to think about it.
And ultra endurance is a fantastic way to go do some of that internal exploration, as you know. Go
Yeah,
do some long distance thing and get sleep deprived, and you'll do a lot of self reflection.
absolutely. So one of the things that I saw you posted about recently was this idea of the athlete operating system, which I'm guessing is probably adjacent to what we've kind of been talking about. Can you give us a little bit of a top line primer? Like what's that all about? What's the thesis?
Yeah, I mean, in sort of my quest to sort of figure out, who I am, what I am, but also what do I have to offer the world from my, decades of experience as a professional athlete, ultra endurance athlete. What does that mean more than podiums? And so the concept of the athlete operating system is really taking tried and true elite performance model that athletes have been honing forever, of, sleep, rest, meditation, skill work, and basically taking that model that I've learned as an athlete, and how do you take that into the rest of your life to achieve high performance at anything. And so we love to watch athletes, everybody, whether you're an athlete or not. We want to watch them win, we want to watch them fail, because they're truly modern warriors. And so taking the athlete's skill set and applying it to other areas of your life. So that's basically the model, the athlete operating system. And the cool thing right now with sort of health and wellness and all that is that the science and technology of the things that lead us to elite performance, we can now measure so many of those things, like Aura Ring and our sleep trackers. And, athletes have had power meters and heart rate monitors and stuff like that for a while, but it goes so much deeper with the science. And so high performers in anything, executives, whatever it is, are really catching on that, hey, I need to take care of this physical package that I live in if I want to perform well at anything. And so the athlete operating system is basically about being an athlete for high performance, human performance in any field, but taking the athlete's model, the sleep, the structure, the periodization of training, the setting of goals, all the things that that athletes do,
Mhm.
failing, getting back up, skill work, mental work. So that's kind of the concept that I'm trying to bring to more people, whether they consider themselves an elite, and for non-elite athletes, anybody who wants to perform at anything.
It's interesting. Dylan talks all the time about how there's just this corollary between running a business and being an athlete, and how it's competitive. It's like sport in so many different ways. And I know as an athlete, you're dubbed the queen of pain, and you could put up with so much, you just had so much grit, and you could work so hard to do whatever. And I've got to imagine in your entrepreneurial journey, you've worked just as hard, if not harder, than you did as an athlete. And putting both of those things together has got to be just an obscene amount of effort that you're outputting on a regular basis, related to some of this stuff of thinking about rest and sleep and everything else. Like, how I've got to imagine there's been some level of burnout at different stages of your career. What are the things that you've done to sort of deal with burnout, whether from the entrepreneurial side or from the athlete side? How do you cope with the inevitability of?
Yeah. Well, I will say as an entrepreneur, yeah, I have worked as hard as I have being an athlete, and the athlete operating system, I kind of developed it because I've not done as well as a business person as I have as an athlete, because I haven't applied that structure. I don't have business coaches. I only recently started using them. Making a plan, like a business plan of like, hey, what events are we going to? What race are we going to do? I mean, I have a loose plan, but so I would almost say that I've made it as an entrepreneur just on grit and hard work, but not on using a sort of conscious skill set and skill development. I could have done better, I think, as a business person. And so that's kind of where this shift comes in, is taking what I know as an athlete and applying it to my business. And I really haven't done that super well, other than just trying hard and being innovative. But and most of it deals with getting support from other people, and deals with, and this comes into your question of rest and burnout. I've been completely burned out in my business. As an athlete, not so much, because I had a structure and I had rest and I had people like you that we would talk about, okay, what are we going to work on next? Or where are the places that we need to do some development? And I've not applied that to my business. So, and I'm experiencing business burnout right now. Like, it's happening because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm working so hard. Why am I not getting anywhere? And it's because I'm running on a treadmill instead of climbing a mountain. And it's as simple as that. And so for me, I've had a big shutdown for the last couple of years. One, because I had a concussion. I fell on my bike 2.5 years ago, and it really did stop me in my tracks. It's been a super long recovery of just like ongoing symptoms for a long time, which is a different story for later. But that really was a forced massive rest for the last couple of years. I've been still doing my sport, but not haven't done any really big missions. And I've really started thinking about, okay, well, what does this mean for my business? What if I can't do sport anymore? Like what, and I'm healing, I'm recovering, I'm gonna get back to adventuring. But it gave me this sort of forced 2-year period to actually really do a deep, deep rest and a deep look at what is my business, and let's apply the athlete operating system to business development and go from here. So I'm like this student right now trying to figure it out, but also share what I'm learning with other people.
Well, going into the topic of sharing what you're learning with other people, I really want to talk to you about what I saw at Sea Otter. You did the women's uplift industry meetup at Sea Otter, which I thought had just an incredible turnout. And I know you've also got the bringing outdoor women in at the Outside Festival coming up in a couple of weeks. I'd love to hear from you. How did this come together? And just for the listeners who maybe didn't hear us talk about it in a previous episode, which we did, but you brought together women from the industry and women who wanted to be in the bike industry, and you were part of a panel where you talked about your different experiences and you shared. And what I thought was actually really impressive was the Q&A session, not just the answers that you and the rest of the team provided, but the questions that kind of came up as well. I thought it was really, really great overall discussion from both the panel and the people that were watching. But how did that all come together, and what were your takeaways from the first event?
Cool. That thank you for covering that. And that really was an impromptu thing that happened. Is I've always been about getting more women into sport. Always. Like hosting free clinics, getting more women into sport and riding bikes, climbing, whatever it is. And I've been doing that for 20 years. And what you see now on the trail, in the climbing gyms, paddling, you see a way higher, much more equal participation level of women and men when you're out on the trails based on compared to 15 years ago. The participation of more women and girls is huge in outdoor sports. What I don't yet see, the next layer up, I still am not seeing women involved in leadership roles in the outdoor industry, especially cycling. And so I'm pretty motivated right now to try to be a trailblazer in that area and open up the conversation and be like, why are women leaving? I heard the stat that women are just leaving the bike industry, in droves. And that's kind of a bummer because I know women are riding, and it's not just that I want women to be involved in leadership and outdoor sports. It's that it's better for everyone if there's a diverse work group. You know that from Red Bull.
Yeah.
If it's a bunch of people that are just like you in the boardroom, the decisions aren't going to be that innovative. They aren't going to be that creative. And so diversifying the workforce in the outdoor industries is going to be better for everybody. And so I was pretty staggered when I heard that women aren't working in the bike industry. And so I threw together this impromptu, gathering at Sea Otter at the Sierra Nevada 10. It was open to men and women and everybody of like, hey, how do we retain and keep women and get women stoked to work in the bike industry? And it was massive. There were hundreds of people. There was great conversation. What I took from it is that there is a lot of energy and a lot of cool people who want to see women in the bike industry. They just don't know what to do. Whether you're a woman in the bike industry or you're thinking of being in the bike industry, or you're a guy that's in a leadership role at one of the big companies. What do we do? And so this was really just a conversation to open the conversation and make people feel supported. I don't have all the answers, we'll do some follow up from it. We gathered some names and emails to do some research just to figure out like how do we make this better for people. So it really was just this grassroots thing to address a problem that I'm seeing, and that went so well that we're actually taking it to the Outside Festival and expanding beyond cycling. And so we'll be doing a panel in the Outside Summit, which is an industry event on Friday, and then we'll also have a open to the public one like we did at Sea Otter on Saturday, where it's women having a discussion about being in the bike industry, and we have some really high powered people from the North Face, REI, the Ready State. myself, former Nike people. I mean, the list of women and their accomplishments, it's so inspiring for me. And so we're really just starting these conversations, and the outside festival is has made space for us, which is really cool. Um, and yeah, it's just kind of maybe trailblazing in a little bit different area of now people, women are participating. Let's get them involved on an even deeper level in the leadership roles, and so somebody can get their dream job
Yeah.
and diversify kind of the decision making in the outdoor industry.
What I thought was really great about the event that I was at, and I'm assuming you'll have something very similar at the Outside Festival, was the networking and the relationship building that happened at that event, and people having conversations specifically around this topic with the main question, what do you do? What do you want to do? Where are you trying to go? And if everybody is kind of focused in on trying to open those doors for each other and trying to help each other get into the industry, I mean, that's the most positive thing. And to my knowledge, I haven't seen that anywhere else. And that's exactly what needs to happen. We used to have events like Interbike where, you'd have a chance to interface with everybody in the industry. And other than Sea Otter, there isn't really a time that you can really get FaceTime with anybody.
Yeah, and I mean, I gave you a shout out there because you're like, who's helped you in your career? And like, I always, everyone is a mentor and a mentee for their whole life. Hopefully, you're helping someone, they're helping you. Nothing happens in a vacuum. And I'll go back to the human aspect of life is something that no technology, no AI is going to be able to replace. And so, yeah, you meet someone at an event like that and they say hi, and, you know, all of a sudden you can go maybe interview for a job that they have opened up, or they might give you advice on building a website, or athletes might be interacting and being like, well, this is how I did that. So, I mean, it's important conversation to have, and in person. I mean, podcasts like this are great because it's hitting specifically on this point, but getting together in person and just like chatting with people and networking, it's pretty powerful. Maybe it's kind of old school, but I think we need to return to some of those old school maneuvers. So yeah, getting people together to talk about this topic.
Yeah. I think also, the networking is community building ultimately, right? And that's still one of the most powerful things you can possibly do. If you build a community around this, it's just this tidal wave of energy moving in that direction to get the results that we want to get, and I think it's super important.
People want to belong, like in anything that they do, whether it's bike riding or in their work or in their community. You want to belong, you want to feel like you're connected. And so yeah, thanks for giving a spotlight to that. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. So I mean, we could talk for hours and hours. What's next on the plate? Obviously, you're going to the Outside Festival, you're going to do this panel and these meetings and everything. What else is on the horizon for you?
So I have some I want to get back to some expeditions. I have some I've been, Eric Larson, do you know that guy?
Name sounds super familiar.
Yeah, he does a lot of cold weather stuff. There's part of me that still wants to do some really long, cold explorations. Maybe going back to the long version of the Iditarod Trail. I have some. I'm really have a itching for some multi-day, self-supported, bike or foot things. I've got my eye on some things here in Idaho that are, I think returning to my roots a little bit of those adventure racing days. So I have some of those things on my mind. Idea that was launched from Blood Road that you and I have talked about is I dream of doing all the iconic trails in the world. We talked about the Oregon Trail and Silk Road, and so that idea is still marinating within me of to do a series kind of like Blood Road, in that, what is the current situation there? What is the history of the place? A lot more storytelling on the bike, hopefully more adventuring and journeying and storytelling on the bike. So that's personally what I'm working towards, and it's also professionally as well. But then I'm also really motivated in this area of supporting athletes who are trying to make a business for themselves. I'm helping one young gravel racer kind of find her way, just sort of as a mentor a little bit, and wanting to talk to more companies about how to basically, how does a company really maximize their investment in
Mm.
their athletes, because from Red Bull, it's a huge financial investment. And so how do you support, if I could be a bridge and support the business and the individual athletes, and sort of help both maximize their return. That's an area I'm really trying to lean into, and find ways to use my skill set there, because like you with this podcast, I have decades of a skill set that um, people need. And
Yeah.
so finding a way, so this is my entrepreneurial challenge, is designing and finding a way to take the skill set that I have to share with more businesses, more individuals, and help them elevate their performance and their return on the investment in those athletes. So I'm figuring that out right now.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm in the front row waiting to just see all this stuff unfold. I'm so excited.
Awesome.
Okay, so we have a segment that we do every single podcast called BPC, which is brand product content. And it doesn't have to necessarily be related to the topic that we're discussing on the podcast. It's just something that kind of caught our eye, something that we want to highlight, something we found interesting during the week. And I prompted you before our we set this call, but I'm gonna let you go first since you're our guest today. Brand product content or all of the above. What you got?
Yeah, this is kind of a this kind of encompasses all of those things, and we've talked about it a little bit already. But it's the Outside Festival that is coming up in Denver. It's May 31st, June 1 and 2, and we've already talked about Interbike is gone. Outdoor Retailer Show is gone. There's Sea Otter for the bike industry, and you talked about in a previous episode about how it's so important for like the brands and the community and the athletes to gather. And that's Sea Otter has that for cycling, but there really is nothing in outdoor sport that encompasses that. And so Outside has a pretty audacious goal to basically be the annual event where brands, athletes, gear, whether you're in the business, you're a recreational athlete in the outdoors, whether you're in you know, running for an office, to create change in the outdoors, like Caroline Gleich. So they really have this vision of being the one place in that whole entire outdoor industry in North America that people would want to gather for community, for fun. They've sort of positioned it as, they've described it as the South by Southwest for the outdoor industry. They've got music, they've got climbing walls, fun interactive stuff, but they've also got a ton of learning. They've got the business aspect, like I talked about on the Friday, and so it really is. I'm looking forward to it, because I post COVID, I've really missed ways of connecting with the outdoor community, and we all know there's billions of people taking part in running, biking, kayaking, hunting. It encompasses everybody. And so they have this audacious goal, which I think is really needed and necessary to bring us all together as a community. So this is the first year I've committed to being there, just because I miss all my friends, but I also want to see what's going on. It's kind of like this podcast talking about what's going on in the outdoor industry. I think I'm going to learn a ton about what's going on with gear, what's going on with decision making, what's going on in leadership, what my athlete friends are doing. So it's gonna be really awesome. So I'll report back. But this is the first year of it. It's this year in Denver, and they made a huge collaboration with the city of Denver also. Which, when you talk about the challenge of putting on events, I can't even imagine how this has happened, or the challenge this was coming together. Diana Nyad's going to be there. There's going to be a bunch of films playing. So I think it's going to be really cool, and I feel like the outdoor community needs it.
Hmm. I think going back to that point we were talking about earlier of cross pollination, not
Mhm.
just between athletes, but between brands, between people in the industry, all the discussions that come out of something as potentially big as this would be really interesting to see potential outcomes of the people that are looking to make a change, looking to make an impact on the outdoor industry. What a great place to start, and talk to all kinds of different people, because you can go to a climbing conference, or Sea Otter, or Dylan just launched TrailCon, which is for trail running. But to have a place that has a little bit of everything, where you can get a good flavor for what all the different outdoor sports are kind of working towards, and the different brands and the different people in those industries, this seems promising. And I'm anxious to hear the report, and I can't wait to hear. Hopefully some of this stuff will be recorded too, because I think the discussion you're going to have, the bringing out outdoor women in discussion, I think is really vital. And you and I have talked a little bit about that, of like, how can we make sure that that travels beyond the festival too, so that more people can hear that message, and get a chance to connect with it, and be part of the community. I think more than anything, if you weren't at Sea Otter and you're not going to be at this event, how else can you be a part of this community? Because I think a lot of people want to be there and want to be in the mix.
Yeah, that's my mission, is to try to record, bring the conversations, bring the Q&A, and keep the conversation going worldwide, just not just at the events. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it goes. I can't wait.
Very cool. Okay, I've got a really weird one for today. uh So Leonardo da Vinci had a famous saying that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Mm.
And there is a brand called Mixalo She. And it is one of the big, I don't know if you'd call it a trend, but something that's definitely happening now is that there are a lot of non-alcoholic beverages that are launching, kind of mocktails and things like that, right? Lots and lots of brands, and a lot of the existing alcohol brands or beer brands are coming out with non-alcoholic versions of their stuff. So Mixology is another one of those, where they have kind of mocktails in a can. And they've been promoting, they partnered with Zayn Malik from One Direction, and they do all these different things. They've got really cool packaging, all these different things. But one of the things that's happened over the last month is this woman by the name of Nicole the Intern. And she started a Instagram account called The Best Marketing Strategy Ever. And in the last month, it's grown to 309,000 followers. It's tripled their email size. The sales at their business are up 130%. And the Instagram account, the secondary Instagram account that Nicole the Intern runs, it's a video of her smashing a can of mixology with, on the screen, text that says 60 days remaining to prove to my boss that smashing this can is more effective than his entire marketing strategy. And it's unconventional, it's counterintuitive, but sometimes the most simple things just cut through. Because if you're a mocktail brand and everybody's making mocktails, I don't know how you cut through, even if you have the coolest packaging and you're partnering with the guy from One Direction and you're doing all these different things. What do you do to cut through? And this woman who just smashes a can daily, and she, to her credit, each one is like, she just did a Kill Bill one and a Harry Potter one, and they all have like themes, but they're kind of like a raw, whatever, of her just destroying a can. And one of the discussions we've been having a lot is like, is this whole thing a marketing plan that they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a rogue intern who's going to make a second account. And one of the big hooks is that her boss said that when she gets that account to 500K, they'll rename the brand to whatever she wants. And she's developed the Smash Army. I mean, she's doing community building, she's doing brand building, she's getting people excited. When you go to their website, the email pop-up that comes in is like, Nicole says that you're here because of her thing. If that's true, put your email here, and if not, click here. And so, like, they're doing all this stuff to kind of incorporate this moment. I'm just fascinated, and I love that. I'm all about sort of the anti-hero, the anti-brand kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if this actually is going to work in the long run. Like, what happens after the 60 days? What happens, does she just keep smashing cans for the next like couple of years? I don't know. But
When's
I'm
her 60 days up? Because we need to check. And I will say, Nicole, if you need a job after those 60 days, Lucy and I will we will hire you, both of us.
her Instagram or her LinkedIn's probably just loaded right now with job offers. I am I am locked in, and 309,000 people probably over the course of this podcast. That number's gone up dramatically.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
I think she's still got like 28 or 29 days before she has to hit the 500, and I feel pretty confident she'll get there.
Mhm.
But I love this idea whenever you're trying to, build a community, or whenever you're trying to market a product or any of those other things, when you take a counterintuitive approach, when you zig when everybody else is zagging. I love that, and I love following the story, and I can't wait to find out what's going to happen. And
It's brilliant. Pretty I have to think the company is organized it and it's pretty brilliant.
yeah,
So maybe
even
you
if
need them on the podcast.
yeah, even if they did say, like, what if we did a thing where we had a rogue intern? It's still genius. If it's truly just the intern going rogue, even more genius. But either way, the ability for a brand to actually take, even if she did go rogue, or even if this was planned, the ability for them to capture that energy and actually build into it and say, like, all right, if you're here because of this, you sign up here. And if you do this, it's just really fascinating to watch them build a marketing plan around what may or may not be a planned stunt. It's really fascinating to see them sort of wring value out of something that was not guaranteed to succeed. I mean, it didn't have to pop off, but yeah, one of the videos has like 25 million views. It's just someone smashing a can or something with a bat.
I mean, this brings us right back to the beginning of the conversation, is being a trailblazer, being a risk taker, being creative and going for it. There isn't a path. Like when people are like, what's the path to do this or that? There isn't one. And the one that's already there isn't going to be the good one.
That's right.
So making your own path. But yeah, good job, Nicole and mixology.
Perfect. Well, thank you again for being on Second Nature. It was so good to talk to you, and I think a lot of people. I mean, there's so much to take from this, from any angle of the outdoor industry. There's something to learn from all this stuff that you brought today. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for letting me share and kind of go down memory lane with you as well, Aaron. It was really fun.
Awesome.